Dave Konrath, thank you so much for making today's call.
Pleasure.
I have to say, if there's one person that the term your reputation precedes you fits absolutely bang on, it's you. Every single person that we speak to in this space in value selling, value consulting, has named you as one of the best people in the business. And it's an honor, obviously, to speak with you. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Well, that's very flattering. I'm not sure hopefully, if I can live up to that.
No, no pressure. But look, it would be great just if you wouldn't mind giving a bit of introduction on yourself. You've got an incredible background in history, started from, BMC software through to Fuse and Sprinkler. And I'd love to just get a little bit view from you on last 15 years of your career in this space.
So, I mean, I started out actually in pre-sales and pre-sales management, and then went on to run pre-sales and post-sales teams. And then I guess if you kind of look at all of the different things that I really enjoyed doing, that would kind of come together in the value engineering role. So it was kind of perfect actually. So it just, everything kind of rooted through to that, and then it's really progressed. That role has then really progressed and grown. So now it's grown to much more than it was at sort of in its infancy. Also finding that companies are now looking at the value-based role much earlier on in their cycle as well, which is great to see. So typically, a company would need to be fairly mature before they really thought about having a value practice. Now that's happening much sooner. We're seeing sort of value practices now being formed right at the start of startups, so which is great to see.
And do you see that because you see the market is becoming more and more mature and sophisticated in the way that it's selling? Or do you see it as a function of a growing need in the market because of how challenging sales have become over the course of the last couple of years?
Bit of both, really. I think that's definitely a better understanding and maturity now of the value role itself, and that's certainly driving it. But also the market itself, and an understanding that actually we really need to justify, cost justify, and build a solid CFO ready business case around a sale now.
It's really interesting because it's one of those roles that if you're not generally in the software space, it's not a role that you would be very familiar with, right? And as you speak with more and more organizations in some of the top players, it's roles that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. But maybe for the audience, it would be helpful to understand from you, how would you define the role of a business value consultant, value engineer? What are the top three items on the job description, so to speak?
Yeah, it's pretty broad, really. So I would say that value engineering is a thread that runs all the way through the sales process. So I would see it being involved very early on with like a value hypothesis. So this is the value that products can bring to a certain industry, and putting that into context of the trends and the headwinds in that industry. But then moving into like a financial justification to more of a value at stake. So this is a high level value that we believe that we can bring to, and that really sort of through to building out a true business value assessment, which is, okay, now let's run some interviews, let's get deeper, let's get wide in an account, and let's really really uncover all of the different benefit areas that may not already be understood, and pulling all of that together. But then I think it then extends into, how do you then align this to the implementation? How do you align it to a proof of value? And ultimately then, how do you then use what we've built in order to measure against that? So, so using the value assessment that you've built as a baseline that you can then, and a target that you can then measure against, and really hold ourselves accountable to delivering the value that was outlined in the business case. So I think it's really that. I see sort of value engineering as that thread, rather than sort of discrete I guess it's sort of value exercises through the sales process. I see it as being as one thread that follows all the way through.
And how is that partnership with the account executive? How does that intertwine and work? And where does, I guess it's not really a question of where one's job starts, the other one finishes. How does that partnership play out in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean it's done well, it's really a partnership all the way through the sales process. So I think there's very defined roles between the two. So usually I think it naturally finds a balance, I think. But key to getting in early and then working through, but more as an ongoing partnership. And that works so much better than obviously just being, sort of coming in, doing a discrete piece of work, building out a business case and then disappearing. It's way more successful if you're involved right from the start and you see that opportunity go and grow. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because Matthew Welsh, who we had on just a few days ago, and obviously sings your praises. He said something that I found really like bang on. He said value is a team sport, right? It's something that's brought through the entire organization, and if it's not, then it doesn't really deliver on its purpose, right?
Yeah. No, exactly that. So yeah, and I think that goes back to really the thread that runs through everything, and it's kind of pulling everyone together around the value. So, as I say, pulling together, the pre-sales teams as well, and really working tightly with pre-sales to align the proof of value out to implementation, and then with the customer success managers to align on the value as well. So 100% a real team sport.
How would you classify the need? Because you mentioned something earlier at the beginning of this conversation, which is you're seeing younger and younger companies, or companies earlier in their trajectory, bringing in that area of expertise.
Yeah.
How do you know as a company when you need or if you need this value role? Is the criteria a relatively complex product? How would you define that need for maybe a co-founder or a CRO to make a decision? Yes, we need value engineering or value management as a core part of our GTM motion.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I recently did some work for a small company they were done incredibly well. So they're incredibly successful. They were signing big deals. They got a lot of funding. But they kind of had a realization very early that actually when we need some form of business case to go alongside, we can't just do this we can't just kind of basically just keep doing this the way we are. So although it was super early, when we really kind of dug into what are the benefits for different personas, they knew it instinctively but couldn't really articulate it, and it wasn't, and it took a fair bit of work to kind of really document that. But this was done really early, and then from then on they could leverage that for other sellers. So they kind of had that realization really early, and I think and they gained a lot, kind of distilling down all of this sort of instinctive knowledge that they had as founders of the company into something which was repeatable that they could then roll out to the sales force. So I guess to answer your question, it's a kind of a realization that happens hopefully as this was very early startup. I think there were about sort of 30-40 people.
Okay, but that's a good indicator, right? 30-40 is early, but it's not like pure startup. I would assume at that point you need to have a clear view of what your product market fit is, or some degree of kind of assurance, your ICP, and I would presume your outcomes, right? You have some analytics.
Yeah, and not just pure. Like this is a technology company, and everything was about the technology, and they hadn't really thought about the business benefits above and beyond. So, just keep asking, why is that a problem? Like to them, they instinctively knew why it was a problem, but it wasn't to me, not coming from that industry. And so, okay, why is that a problem? What are the implications of that? And then ultimately you get to what really matters. Okay, so that's why someone will buy it. It's not because you could speed this up by an hour. It's because you get faster to market, or you can, or whatever that might be. So it was really following that thread up to really understand what the business benefits were, and that isn't always, well, that certainly in this case hadn't been done.
I love that concept of why is that a problem. Can you dive a little bit more deeply into that approach?
Yeah, it's I guess it's the classic term is kind of peeling the onion really, but it's it's very easy to have a an implied need for something, and the trick is to turn that into an explicit need for something. And really, it's why is that important? And we get this with the business value assessment when we're running interviews as well. It's very easy to come away from those interviews with a set of kind of current state, and we're doing this, and the questioning has always got to be, but what's the implication of that? Why is that really a problem? And usually that then uncovers a little more information, and then, okay, but who really cares about that? And you're getting, you get higher, and then you eventually get to, okay, now we really understand what the problem of this is, as opposed to just stopping when you're kind of uncovering a challenge with the current state, and you're not really exploring that all the way up and finding out what the real pain is.
Do you find when you come into a new organization that you need your role for value management or value engineer to operate well? Is there a degree of training that needs to happen at the account exec level, the value sellers, to really, take best advantage of the role and the support that your role provides?
Yeah, it's typically yes. We would. So in the past, we've always rolled out, an enablement around a business value assessment. Typically, it comes a little later. So, enablement is usually, there's a first sort of onboarding enablement, and then later down there, as sellers then kind of get further down the sales process, and then that second level or second boot camp would then cover the business value assessment and sort of reintroduce the team as well. And then in some cases we've run like full one-day sessions on this is how you would run a BVA. These are interview skills around how to really drive to the value, how to capture the metrics that you would need in a business case, for example, and run. But definitely there's enablement that's needed for a business value assessment, but it tends to come later down as people get more comfortable with the sales process and get further through it.
Makes sense. And just to take a different direction now in terms of the evolution of the market itself, how have you seen the market evolve over the course of the last 4 years? We see that 4 years ago, especially software was much easier to sell. There were much bigger budgets. Money was free, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it was easier to, companies were buying, renewals were pretty much a foregone conclusion. The market is obviously not what it was 4 years ago. Every penny is being scrutinized. Companies looking to do more with less, and they're consolidating increasingly. Have you seen the kind of value stories evolve over the last few years, and maybe across the companies that you've worked in?
Yeah. I've literally just come off a call actually, which was interesting with the customer who was saying that typically they were saying like, our business cases that we need internally have really changed. So they were saying before we could put something together, it was fairly high level, it would be signed off. Now they were saying that actually, looking at what you're doing in the business value assessment and that level of detail is actually what we're going to need to populate our internal business case template. So that we're seeing more and more is that it's, it started off, you could, fairly sort of, you could have intangible benefit, a lot of intangible benefits in there. You wouldn't necessarily need to, if you're looking at productivity hours, you wouldn't necessarily need to map those to what exactly you're going to do with those hours and how they're going to be consumed. Whereas now you need to take that extra step is what we're saying, which in turn kind of dictates the level of detail that you need to put into a BVA in order to put that defensibility there. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answered the question. But
and it feels very aligned to our product, just to say. It wasn't a trick question, I guarantee. But no, I mean, obviously we're seeing that too, right? And the reason why we exist is for that very reason, that there seems to be an increasing, not scrutiny, but like you said, a need to translate any what I guess you would consider soft value into real hard numbers, and where from what we are seeing, a lot of the companies we work with, whereas 4 years ago the budget didn't go up to the CFO or the business unit owner, now everything does. Every penny is reviewed, and so what we find that actually this goes to one of the other questions I wanted to ask you is we have found that an increasing trend in when companies are losing deals, they're not losing them to competitors, they're losing them to indecision. There's some crazy stat. There's a book called The Jolt Effect that says that 40 to 60% of deals are lost to indecision.
Right. Right. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me.
And I mean, yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that. If that's something that you're seeing, and clearly, I would imagine that the value as a role, value management engineering, as you prefer to call it, would have a pretty strong role in helping to address that indecision.
Yeah. It's, I guess, it comes down to the why now. Why do anything now? You've been doing it this way for the last 4 or 5 years, however long it might be. What is it that's really driving you to do something within the next few months? And that really, again, is something that the business case can really help with. Is creating and building, and one, uncovering if they're, uncovering in any additional kind of reasons once we run a BVA and get wider. Then what are some of the other aspects that can build into creating the why now, but also building out a financial case which makes it more compelling as well. And really, so there's a lot of different aspects that go into that, but all come together into a compelling case for why to do something now. And that's really the indecision. Is there's no, we've been doing it like this for ages. We can carry on for the next year, or we could carry on for the next 2 years, and that's, again, is where the business value assessment can really help. And the value team can really help to create that why now and to create an event.
I fully agree. We found with a lot of the companies that we work with that their prospects, it often happens that deal gets stalled because they don't have the sufficient business case to be able to make that case to their economic buyer. They don't, and equally it means that they don't have the confidence, that whole post-validation event where that buyer risk is at the most intense level where they need to make that decision.
Yeah.
If they don't have enough conviction through that business case or the business value assessment, then it's never gonna take that final step of signing.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I think, is linked to the implementation that's linked to value, the value realization that holds a vendor accountable for the delivery of the value that we've put up front as well. And that all removes risk if you've got, and in a lot of cases, will position a business value assessment as this is, which it is. It's all about getting a baseline, putting a target in place that can then be used to really help to drive success. You can start to prioritize value and bring forward the high value areas, and you can start to it's all about the customer's success rather than a business case itself. It's about how can we use that to really drive success.
It's true, because we always say that the business case is still a hypothesis even when you sign the contract, right? Because until you actually start delivering and demonstrating the value that's created through the delivery of that service, that business case is still a hypothesis. And so it's that what we that revenue bow tie, that post-sale part where you have to demonstrate impact becomes even more important, because it's all down to the credibility of the original business case, your assessment of the factors that determined that decision at the time, and how you can demonstrate value beyond.
Yeah.
And where does value, your role, kind of contribute to that post-sales period, that customer success and value delivery?
Yeah, it's been different in different companies, but I mean, value realization is pretty tightly tied to value engineering and to the value consulting world, in that you're putting together the map of value, really to value to the project centric metrics. So it's one thing talking about post-sale, talking about the level of adoption and the project metrics. It's another mapping those back to the value that was in the original business case. So, and that's really what, and that's why they bought the product is the value that's been articulated. So, there's a definite role for value consulting in really helping to map those, say, the project-centric metrics back to real business value. It's not just about adoption. It's about, okay, but how, what was this? What was this like? What was the baseline? How are you measuring against that? And then how, when you roll all of that up, does that then compare to what was outlined in the original business case? And how is this really moving the business forward? So I see there's a definite tight link between those two.
And I can imagine even more so today where, churn risk is definitely heightened. And so the need to demonstrate value is more needed than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. We're just pretty much on time, and I don't want to take up much more of it. I do have two final questions for you. Actually, I'm going to ask you one third one, only because it's you, Dave, and we've heard so many good things about you. What is your specific secret sauce in value engineering and value management? What is it that makes Dave special? Because we've heard that a lot.
Right. I have no idea. I don't know how to answer that, honestly. One is it's very nice for you to say that. I don't know. I mean, I've always been surrounded by good people, and I guess if there's one thing, which is absolutely key to any value role is just the level of sponsorship that you've got within a company. So if I've been lucky in that I've been at companies where there's been great sponsorship for value, and it's easy. You could fail very easily, I think, if you haven't got that level of sponsorship, and people take shortcuts and bypass the whole value role, and that can then lead to problems sort of later down the sales cycle. So it's you're speeding up earlier on, and it obviously slows things down or slips out the quarter because you're missing a justification. So I would say it's very much down to the level of sponsorship. I mean, people like Chris Wood, Adam Quartermain, who I've worked closely with, and have just been fantastic in the level of support.
Brilliant. Well, I think you're answering my next question, or my next two questions, which first one is, who's the best value seller?
Yeah, and that's a really it's a splitting community, right? As you know, so there's so many good people that I've worked with. I mean, the previous company I had the pleasure of working with, Matt Welsh and Nasli. Prior to that, going back in time, people like Mark Nethercott, Irfan Verji, who was at Sprinkler, who was amazing. So just a ton of people. It's way too many to mention.
Fair enough. Dave, thank you very much for your time today. I don't want to take up too much more. It's been a great conversation.